Welcome to an audio edition of the Garden Report podcast. And today is kind of my day because it's the off season. And what does my day mean? It means I'm going to talk NBA history, a little bit of ABA. I'm going to do that get off my lawn, old man stuff. Never thought I'd be compared Ty when I started working. That's Ty Ray's laugh you hear there. When I started working with Ty, he always said it. Never thought I'd be saying it, but I'm saying it now too. Get off my lawn, because Bob Ryan is in the house, and Ty Ray and I spent a good half hour just chatting NBA history. Okay, we're joined now by the legendary scribe, Bob Ryan. Ty Ray, Bob Ryan on the phone with us. You and I are always going back and forth about NBA history versus today. Well, we have the man. We have the Hall of Famer on the line with us now. Bob, what's going on?
Well, it's going on. I'm enjoying my summer. I'm digesting all this incredible NBA turmoil, and you know that's getting ready for a baseball All-Star game. But that's that. I'm doing fine.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about NBA explosions, right? Kawhi caused an earthquake. The NBA is people are saying positioned in a great way, you know, moving forward with the player movement. I don't know that I totally agree, but we're more here to get your opinion, and we'll go towards that. But first, we want to look back, because Ty and I are constantly having arguments on Twitter, you know, with all our best friends over there about, history versus today. And it got me thinking, ABA, NBA, right? Merger happened what year, Bob?
76 in Hyannis, Massachusetts. That it was consummated at the NBA meetings in Hyannis, Massachusetts.
How about that, Ty? Yeah. It was like Versailles. The meeting was Versailles.
I was there covering it, and we got more than we bargained for.
Oh, well, Bob, what's interesting to me is you talk to people about the ABA, especially people who don't remember the history, and they act as if it was like the XFL or the WFL or or the USFL, like it was some fleeting league. It was around for a friggin' decade, and it influences basketball today.
It does, in different ways, both on and off the court. Statistically, it does, because the ABA kept track of block shots officially and steals, which the NBA did not, for example. And, of course, the three-point shot, which I know we're going to get into at some length. But, yes, the league came into being in 1966, and it did fluctuate over the years with franchises, and the late lamented Anaheim Amigos, in Les Selvage, I remember making 10 three-pointers, which we thought was just unimaginable. I mean, I gave birth to one of my. I was a box score freak in the old days one of my favorite box scores of the day, which of course has been exceeded several times over, was John Roach went 8:024. I just freaked out at that. I just thought that was so. But it comes into being, and they raid the NBA, and Rick Barry is a prominent prize, as is Billy Cunningham, Joe Caldwell. They played on the same team, and Carolina, and Zelmo Beatty and others. So
Artis Gilmore, Moses.
Right.
Moses?
Well, I'm talking about the guys that jumped. Artis started out as an ABA player.
Gotcha.
They developed their own stars who are now in the Hall of Fame. We'll get to that too. But it was viable competitively. They were better than people thought. And when when in the early 70s, when the exhibition games began, we smug, and count myself in on this, NBA types figured that we'll show those guys. And I know if you check the record, you will see that there was astonishing parity in those NBA ABA All-Star games. Not All-Star games, excuse me. NBA ABA exhibition games. Many of them.
And Bob, Nick wasn't aware that there were these exhibition games, right? And I told him.
That's how I got to meet Larry Brown and Doug Moe in Carolina. Yeah. Doug Moe was Larry Brown's assistant with the Carolina Cougars, and Carl Shear was the cheese down there, and he was, of course, had been prominent in Buffalo. And I knew him from the NBA. Oh my God! I covered games there. I saw ABA exhibition games, and I could go on, but and Memphis. That's where I met Woody Page. Woody Page was covering the Memphis, whatever they were then, whether they were the Tams or the pros. I don't remember that year. But Babe McCarthy was the coach. Johnny Newman was the star, and Woody Page was covering for the local paper in Nashville, and we met in 1973. So we've known each other for 46 years. That was a big deal, those NBA, ABA exhibition games.
And they were intense. I was telling Nick that Tommy and Dave Cowens both got thrown out of exhibition games.
Oh, Dave Cowens famously punted the ball up into the upper deck.
Was it the ABA ball or the NBA ball?
That was an ABA ball, because it was obviously the game was played in their court. Oh yeah, and Dave Cowens broke his foot in Asheville, North Carolina. This is a great one. Only Dave Cowens. He's in an exhibition game, and again, Fatty Taylor stole the ball, and instead of letting him go, Dave chases him down and blocks the shot, and then crashes into the superstructure of the basket and breaks his foot and misses the first 17 games of the 1974-75 season. And I remember the first time the Celtics played the Nets in the Island Garden in West Hempstead and lost on a Rick Barry banked three-pointer. And I remember being astonished that Billy Paltz, the Whopper, had held his own against Dave Cowens. I just couldn't get over it.
Well, Dave is your guy, Bob. I think at Dave Cowens, obviously I'm a little too young. It's more your era than mine. But when I see highlights, I think kind of like way ahead of his time, right?
There's nobody
rebound,
like him.
dribble the full court.
Yeah, there's no style quite like him. He was an incredibly aggressive rebounder and ran the court relentlessly. And
right.
But he had a face-up jumper. He had the good jump hook. He had the hook and the jump hook. He had no right hand whatsoever. None. Everything was left. It went over his right shoulder every single time. Except, he had a spin move though. He had a spin move that he worked in. And that's the only time he went the other way. He went and he timed it so that as he was receiving the entry pass, he was already making his move over his left shoulder, and he killed people with that spin move, and then usually ended up by dunking right-handed on the other side of the basket. And that was his only move in that direction. Otherwise, everything else was right to left.
6'9", 6'9",
6'8.5", 6'9", muscular, a white leaper. In fact, Kenny Hudson, I put this in many pub times over the years. Kenny Hudson, a black referee, and he became a good friend of mine in the league, told me that Cowens was getting fouls called on him because the referees couldn't get used to the white guy jumping that high. This is coming from a black ref. Now, the other thing is he was so incredibly uncommonly aggressive that as a rookie in 1970-71, he fouled out of 15 games and he committed 350 personal fouls. The next year, he cut that out, and he never had anything remotely like that again. He immediately learned how to play with 5 fouls. That's an art. It's a dying, lost art. They won't even let guys do it now because they get 2 fouls in the first half and they come out, which was ridiculous in those days. Nobody did that. John McLeod started that, by the way, the wonderful gentleman.
John McLeod, right?
He's the first person to start pulling guys with 2 fouls in the first half, I promise you.
When he was a Phoenix, or it had to be Phoenix?
Yeah, in Phoenix, yeah. But anyway, we're digressing from the ABA.
That's all right. Keep going.
Bob,
I'm smiling ear to ear, Bob.
Bob, to your point about fouls, in those NBA exhibition games, there was no limit, was there, to fouls? I
don't recall if they abrogated the 6 foul thing or not. You may be right. I don't recall that.
Can you imagine? No.
The only place I know where they went, that they fooled around with that was in college when the Big East went to 6 fouls, which was a disaster. And
could you imagine LeBron James today with no fouls? I mean, he's Giannis. They spend majority of the time on the line.
Yeah, no, I know. It's hard to imagine, yeah. But the games were incredibly competitive. They meant so much to the ABA, and the NBA guys got sobered up. They had to realize, hey, these guys mean business. And, of course, ultimately when the merger was done and the 4 teams came in, they all did quite well, and a couple of them did very well. And the proof of their pudding was the 1977 All-Star Game, which was a milestone in the history of the sport. 10 of the 24 players had ABA roots.
That's incredible.
And you talk to guys like Larry Brown, you talk to guys like Al Bianchi, you talk to guys like Hubie Brown, who coached the championship Kentucky Colonels, and they will beam with pride about that to them. That vindicated what they've been telling people all along, that they had good basketball.
Were you sad to see the ABA go?
Well, I was I liked the idea of the extra world. It gave me more things to cover, really, in a sense. I actually once made a trip. You'll love this one, guys. I once made a trip. I was on a Celtic road trip, And as we're flying out to Chicago, we're stopping in Chicago on our way to Omaha. This is during the the Kansas City Kings Omaha days. And I noted that the Bulls were playing the Knicks in Chicago, and I asked the trainer to pull my bag off, and I was going to get off, and I got off, and I went and covered the game just hanging around with the Knicks in Chicago. Well, what I'm getting at is this. It was the start of 6 games and 6 nights in 6 different states in 2 different leagues. And in addition to the Celtic games, I went to the ABA games in both Salt Lake City and Denver, and in between my travels with the Celtics. And I remember, I'll never forget walking into Salt Lake City, and Larry Brown talked about this 19-year-old kid for the Utah Stars named Moses Malone. And he said, Bob, he's the greatest offensive rebounder I've ever seen in my life. Now, this is the heyday of my revered friend Paul Silas, who was the reigning. He was the reigning gold standard of offensive rebounders in the NBA at 6'7". And here is this very respected coach telling me that the 19-year-old kid was the best offensive rebounder he'd ever seen in his life. Stuff like that you can't forget.
It's also fun, Bob, is I had the pleasure of covering the Nuggets for 5 years. I worked in Denver from 2000 to 2005. Dan Issel was the head coach, and I ran into John McLeod while I was there. And it was so much fun because the Nuggets still have ABA roots. You can still feel it when you're there.
Really?
And you talk. Oh, absolutely. When you talk to fans. No, when you talk to fans. And it feels like an ABA city to me.
Well,
It doesn't
I'll tell you what,
like
as much as that's true, it doesn't even touch the ABA city of them all to this day, and that's Indianapolis. Where they had multiple championships,
and they were the dynasty,
like
right?
Bob Nedelicki and Louis Bob Nedelicki and Don Boosie and Mel Daniels and Roger Brown. And when they built what is now, I don't even know the name of the building. Farmers Life.
Conseco?
It was Conseco originally. When they built it, which by the way is the best building built for basketball in the last 50 years. Nobody's built a better basketball.
Nobody plays hockey there, right? I mean,
no, and it's the best building for basketball for all kinds. And when you go around in the concourse there, when you take yourself on a tour, there's as much homage paid to the ABA days and to high school basketball in college as there is to the NBA. The NBA is like, they're tenants here too, but don't think it's all about them. And the ABA is still more revered in Indianapolis than in any other city.
Are the banners still hanging? I know in Conseco that the banners were hanging in Conseco.
But they were the most successful team. They had the most, as I recall, they had the most championships over the course of time in those 10 years.
So what? Nothing transferred over, right? Championships really didn't transfer over. So Indiana still showed 0.
Nothing. No. Of course not. And it took a long time for the final recognition to come. The first grudging recognition was adopting their statistics. Well, and then the 3-point shot. It took 3 more years before the 3-point shot came in. We can get into that in a second.
Yep.
But originally, the NBA did not keep track of offensive rebounds. Did not keep track of block shots. Individual teams did. And casually, but not officially, and they did not keep track of steals. Those are all things that were brought in permanently in statistic keeping by the merger.
So, guys like Dr. J instantly comes to mind to me. And who would be most impacted after the merger? As you're getting into the 80s and they're getting ready to retire, when their numbers are all said and done, who do you look back at and say, man, they didn't get their due on paper?
Oh, well, that's very good. That's a very good question. I guess I'm going on anecdotal evidence. I'd have to say Roger Brown. People there, of all the ABA stars, I think is the most, maybe not appreciated one historically because a lot of guys are getting their due. They're in the Hall of Fame. Mel Daniels has made it, and of course artists made it, and as much for his ABA as for anything
as his NBA. Yeah.
And of course Issel's different. Issel was a crossover who was a star in both leagues. One of my all-time favorite players, really. But I think Roger Brown probably. Maybe because some of the guys were overlapping. Rick Barry, of course, went back to the NBA.
He went back and forth, right?
And went back and forth. And Billy Cunningham went back, although his career ended abruptly with an awful knee injury, which went way too soon. But Billy was a truly great player. And, of course, one of the great human beings that the league has produced as well.
Great coach, too, right?
And a fine coach. But he had the good sense to know what he didn't know. His first move was when he was named coach. His first move was to go get Chuck Daly as a
that was pretty smart.
And he had one of the all-time NBA wonderful people ever, Jack McMahon. So he had the wise old heads, in helping him out, and he learned from them as well.
Where was Daly prior to that? Where was he prior to that?
He was at Penn. He'd gone to his first head coaching job was at Boston College in '69. He was there 2 years. He got the Penn job, succeeding Dick Harder, and took over. Harder had started with a wonderful run for Penn, and kept it going and a number of years, and then finally he took this opportunity to get into the NBA, and eventually got his own job in Cleveland, which didn't go very well. And I'll never forget Chuck Daly at the NBA meetings, circa 1982, I guess, and he's lobby at a hotel, the Century Plaza in L.A., and we're old friends, we're talking. Literally now, he's standing behind the potted palm, as if in some kind of 40-star movie, and he says to me, who's going to hire, I'm 50, he was at that point, he was approaching or hit 50, and he said, who's going to hire me? What am I going to do? And this is the Chuck Daly who later became the Dream Team.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, life is just full of stuff like that.
Billy Cunningham, I obviously don't remember as a player. I remember him slightly as a coach, but my real memory is him replacing Tommy on the national broadcasts. I was devastated. All of a sudden, the Celtics went from being Homer on CBS to it being Philly homers because you had Stockton and Cunningham.
That's okay, but Billy was he was a smart investor, originally. He got on the ground floor of the Heat, and when they got sold, Billy cashed in, and he's living a good life playing golf in Florida and relaxing, and you don't have to worry where his next meal's coming from, I'll tell you that.
He had the right idea. Bob, it's the three-point shot.
Yeah, here we go.
Did you ever think, watching the games back in the 70s, those ABA games, those classic games, that the three-point shot would make its impact on the NBA? Here we are 50 years later. It's changed the game. And is it ever going to go back? Is the NBA ever going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle?
The answer is, I would say it's impossible. The people love it. And now the strategy is fixed. Everyone subscribes to the theory. I've seen it this week in discussions about players, specifically in Boston, Jason Tatum, the second-year center and the idea is they cringe when they take a long two. And I used to say that the thing I hate most of hearing in basketball is the word basketball is the long two. That's a Daryl Moreyism, Daryl Morey takeover of the NBA, and it's not going back. Okay, so and it's permeated the entire game and every level, right down to 8-year-old kids cranking up threes. And
absolutely,
all over America.
My God! And
Steph Curry, I'm being told in a benign way, is the worst thing that's ever happened to basketball in that regard because everyone wants to be Steph Curry. And very few are ever going to be Steph Curry.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, as far as the influences, check out the numbers. It was so slow in catching on, and is reached upwards of 4 and 5 years into the adopting of it in an NBA. Teams were taking fewer than 103 points a season. I know the Lakers I challenge you, the Lakers and the Hawks. Look at some of the numbers that they put up in the first 5 years of the league in terms of refusing to acknowledge the existence of the three. It didn't take over right away, and it was still under control up to I don't know,
90s.
5, 6, 7 years ago. It's all exploded in the last 6, 7, 8 years. To the point where it's the be all and end all, and it's just the whole game is now layup, get fouled, or take a three, and it's so routine now that people come down on 3-on-1, 4-on-1, and don't even think about going for a layup. I mean, it's just amazing.
But you look at guys like Bob. You look at guys like Jordan, Bird. I mean, obviously Bird shot the three, but it was not. I mean, if he shot 5 in a game or 6 in a game, it wasn't.
If he took 5 in a game, right? Larry used it strategically. He didn't like the three. He said at the time for 2 reasons. Seriously. One was that he thought that at that point in time, referees were too often getting it wrong. They were calling 3s 2s and 2s 3s.
Right.
And there was no replay. Obviously there's no visual backup. And that was number 2 was he. Now this is Larry. See, this is why we love. Larry didn't think that if you were down, that you should be able to win a game or go take a late lead with a 3 as opposed to a 2. We thought that was somehow cheating the game. That was not right. That wasn't the way.
And yet he would do it though.
Well, yeah, sure, but he didn't philosophically like
right.
it. It offended his moral sensibility. But of course, if he had to do it, he did it. But remember, Larry made the first three in an All-Star game, right away in 1980 in Washington. Left corner, I can see it. Larry made a three to put away Game 6 in 1981 in Houston. That was the clinching basket. Larry used the three as a weapon better in his time in the first 5, 6, 7 years, better than anybody.
But if he had used it as an essential part of his game, how many more points would he have scored?
Well, in today's game, Larry would be, Larry would say, "Oh, well, that's what you want, man. I'll do it," and he'd take 12 or 13 a game, or more, and he'd score. He'd average 30 because he would be averaging 25 or 8 without it. He'd average 30, which he never did. Average 30. Oh yeah, he'd adapt to the game, but that's not the way the game was played then at all.
But I think it's comparable, Bob, when you're talking to younger fans who will say, "Well, look at how many more points this person scored," or they immediately go to that. And I look at, okay, well, first of all, they're coming out earlier. And secondly, the 3-point shot just wasn't a vital part of the game. Jordan, I think, would have scored 40 a game.
Well, Jordan, had that famous game, playoff game against Portland when he was so hot in the first half, and he had that famous that shrug to the, "Hey man, what can I do?" He looked at the scorer's table after the 6-1 of the first half. Oh yeah. I just laugh at the point totals now in terms of when I look at the three and the distortion of the box scores that I used to love. We can talk about that in a second. But I was going to say, I always love to point out to people, Pistol Pete, A, averaged 44 points a game over a 3-year college career without the three, and B, once had a 68-point game in Madison Square Garden without the three. And he had 3-point range, I assure you. And, I do think, am I not right that they've tried to reconstruct from available the footage of LSU games and then make an estimate and make an attempt at estimating what he might have averaged if he had the three? I think someone's tried to do that.
I think I've seen that somewhere.
And I think he might have averaged close to 50 points a game.
50, yeah, I saw that. It's just, it's hard to get that point across to younger people. I live right by a basketball court, 2 full court basketball courts here in Boston. I go over and watch them, and these kids, all they do is shoot threes. I'm like, dude, you don't know. Like, this is not good, right? Like, so there's no back to the basket. There's no game like that whatsoever. And that was my favorite part. As you know, we've talked about this.
To me,
Kareem, McHale, Parrish, those guys.
To me, as a player, as a 6'1" white guy, the last of the great 6'1" white centers, and there was nothing more fun than posting up. Right. Kicking somebody's ass in the low post is the most fun that you can have on a basketball court. I always thought, and we have no balance. Can't we get some balance restored in the game? That's all I'm looking for. I want some balance.
Is there anything that makes you cringe more than watching Joel Embiid launch a three? It's just
it's
Aaron Baines.
It's worse, but But I'll tell you the most. But I'll give somebody credit for, you talk about adapting, and Brooks Lopez. Look at his career.
He resurrected his career.
I discovered this last year, and I was doing something, and I looked up his number. I was writing a story in the threes, and somehow, I don't know, and I realized the man barely took any at all, literally in the first 6-7 years of his career, barely took any at all, and I bet any one he did take was at the end of the quarter, a desperation thing, kind of thing. And then he said, well, this is the way we are going to be, then this is what I'm going to do. And now he is a major three-point threat. He went from nothing at all to leading his team in attempts in over a year. I don't know, it was in back-to-back years, but within a 2-year span. That's for sure. And look, that's what he does now. That's what he does. He's like all the other big guys now, and he's damn good at it. And I'll give him credit for making himself into this. I'll give him credit for it.
Horford, similar, reinvented his game.
Al's got that nice little. Here's what I love about Al. Al's is a set shot. Al's a little tippy toe set shot. There was not much lift on Al's three. You take a look at that. It's a nice old tippy-toe set shot like Chris Ford. The first three-point shot ever. Let the world know. The first NBA three-point shot, chronologically, was Chris Ford on opening night in 1979. He drifted into the right corner on a break, and he set his feet and got the pass and took a deep breath and recited a couple of verses of a favorite song, and he made a one-hand set.
One-handed.
And that was a one-hand set. And that was his shot in college. That was his shot with the Pistons. Well, it was still a shot, and now it's counting 3 instead of 2.
That's incredible. And you talk about, where is Chris Ford now?
He's living in Greater Atlantic City, where he grew up and where he loves, in Margate, New Jersey. I saw him at John Havlicek's funeral, and he is, contented. Chris Ford, one of my all-time favorite guys in the league, because he was the most as normal a person as I've ever met in coaching and all the years I've covered 4 sports. He was like your next door neighbor. Oh, just by the way, when he left work, he happened to go coach the Boston Celtics. He was a normal. He was a good. Most of them as much as you can be friendly with them, there's a them and an us factor that is inherent, but it was not there with Chris Ford.
But back when you were on the beat, I mean, you chilled with these guys. I mean, they were more accessible than they are now. You got to know.
Oh yeah, the whole world was different.
So
you knew people. I mean, I'm not saying people don't have. Stephen A. Smith's got a Rolodex or whatever. He's got a contacts and he can get the head. I'm sure, and he's. I'm not so that you can get relationships today, but very few people can do that, and he can do it because he's got a network connection, and he's himself. He's a special sui generis, God knows. But in general terms, the average beat guy, and the average beat person in the NBA today will never ever have as much fun and satisfaction of in the whole scope of doing the job as we had in those days, for a variety of reasons, between the travel conditions, the socialization, and the technology that has overwhelmed everybody and made it a 24/7, 365 job, and you don't even have an off season and you don't have a minute's peace. And we had real off seasons and anyway, and we also had real relationships, and I don't think there are too many of them available to people today.
No, there's a general feeling of I think there's as there should be, a guarded feeling, but there seems to be a overtone of the media is the enemy. I don't know if that's politics invading sports or whatever, but there seems to be that swirling around all the time.
No question about it. It's a them us. It's an adversary thing. It wasn't. You always wanted to do your job. You had to be skeptical. I mean, God knows I had my run-ins. Tommy Heinsohn and I had.
I know you and Tommy, right?
Tommy and I, we're good. We're friends. We're very friendly now. He did my podcast not long ago.
I was there.
I got a Tom Heinsohn painting hanging in my living room. We got along fine. But at the time, in the heat of the battle, I had to do my job, and he had to defend himself, and we were at odds about the policy, frankly. And about stuff, and I had relationships with the players, which I think he really resented. And okay, but we worked. When he quit, or when he actually got fired and everything.
Got fired, right?
We were fine. All right. So I had those, but I'll give you an example. My favorite example, but it was a giant fraternity. It included everybody, included the referees, included the trainers. Here's the story: we, the Celtics party, are traveling east to west. For start a West Coast trip, and believe it or not, no charter. Of course, forget that. And not only aren't we chartering, we're not even getting a direct flight. We are changing planes in Chicago. So we changed planes in Chicago, and we got time to kill. We had a couple hours to kill, and we're walking down a corridor, and there's a bunch of very, very tall people coming in the opposite direction. It's the Phoenix Suns, who are going west to east, and they are changing planes in Chicago. And we all have nothing to do, and everybody piles into the bar. And I mean all the players, all the trainers, all the coaches, all the broadcasters, all the writers. It was like a fraternity meeting. That was the NBA in the 70s. Now,
was there
that doesn't exist anymore.
Was there there had to be a bit of sacred. Okay, so you're spending this time with them. You had to have they had to know that you were not going to repeat what was going on or whatever. There had to be that feeling of trust.
You had to establish a relationship based on trust, and that you understood what was printable and not printable, and you understood when you heard things in the locker room and when you had conversations with people, and they understood that you might get a piece of information and hold on to it for a while until down the road it would not be traced back to them,
right.
or the time would be right and you could use it, that you knew how to do that. It takes time to develop that trust. And I believe I developed that trust for the most part. And as such, I consider that, I'm a human being. And not everybody can do this and be comfortable. I agree. I'm a human being first. Then I was a writer second. I was partial to some people who were nice to me, but I had a lot of good relationships. I mentioned Silas, I mentioned Cowens, Havlicek, of course, Don Nelson, who's out there lighting up something right now.
Right.
And there's no doubt. I mean, wait a minute, it's only. It's probably maybe in another hour or two he'll get up and he'll light something up. And but I mean, these were people that I would consider. I'd be very friendly with. Paul Westphal, who's Hall of Fame induction. I'm looking very much forward to in September.
Overdue.
We had, but I when I had to criticize, I criticized, and they understood it came from fairness. The word, it's not objectivity. That's nonsense. There's no such thing. It's fairness. Because everything you choose to report or write is objective, quote unquote. You're making decisions on every word you utter and every word you write and every thing. But how are you fair? And you hope that they agree that you're fair, and they don't always do that. Tommy sure didn't for a while, right. and that's life. You gotta get over that, and you gotta show up. That's the other thing. You gotta show up.
Bob, can you indulge me just for 1 second? You mentioned Paul Westphal, and one of my great childhood memories is watching the Game 5 of the Suns and Celtics in '76 on my 12-inch black and white TV. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Al McCoy and Glenn McDonald for a special podcast we did.
I should send that to Bob.
Yeah, it was wonderful. What was that event like for you? I was able to talk to them about that night. What was that Game 5 like for you? Because even as a 10-year-old child, watching that was exhausting.
It was. When I'm asked, as I frequently am, what's your favorite event you ever covered? And I say, well, I can't give you one, but I can go sport by sport. And the NBA, it is Game 6 in 1975. And it was a drama that was building up to that. The Suns weren't supposed to be there. The Suns weren't supposed to be still in the series after 4 games. It gotten to be a very competitive and exciting series. And now we're at Game 5 in Boston, and the Celtics blow them out in the first 12, 14 minutes. They play the best basketball they played the entire playoffs. Get up by 22. Should be over. The Suns were spunky, and they had 2 rookies who weren't rookies, if you know what I mean, Alvin Adams and Ricky Sobers. And they had great vets like Dick Van Arsdale and Keith Erickson, and they had Westphal then, in his breakthrough year. Anyway, they come back, and they make it a game, and they get back in the game gradually, and then finally with about 3 minutes to go, the Celtics get up by 9 and look like they're in control of the game. And Westphal brings them back. He makes, everyone remembers the spinning 360 banker that he made, right? The spinning 360 banker. And he was so athletic and he was really so great that year. Well, in the next 5 years. Anyway, we get in, and all the stuff that happened, the Havlicek basket, after that was, they thought the game was over, but the crowd stormed the floor, but there was 2 seconds that needed to be put back on the clock. And then Richie Powers, the referee, got attacked by a fan. They're rolling around on the floor. And then we got Silas calling a timeout he didn't have, and Richie Powers to the bitterness. It was dying day of Al Bianchi. We can tell that story. Is raving it off. You can see him going no. And Richie was asked later about it, and he said, "I didn't want the game to end that way." Talk about George Floyd being justice, right? So, and then, of course, culminating with after Havlicek's basket, and the clock is restored, and the Celtics are up by 1. There's 2 seconds, and Westphal, they need to get the ball advanced. They didn't have a timeout. And the only way they're going to get the ball advanced to midcourt is if they call a timeout they don't have. Westphal figures this out. You can see him on the video. He's looking up at the clock. He even went over near the scorer's table and asked them. And he went back and he's pointing and he's gesticulating to McLeod. And McLeod goes, okay, they call the timeout they don't have. They get the technical. JoJo White makes the technical. And Mike, just think if he didn't. And now they're up by 2. And so the ball gets thrown in, and Garherd hits that moonshot 18-footer. Don't let anybody tell you it would have been a 3. It was foul line extended. It wasn't going to be a 3. The folklore has, progressed over the years. but it was a classic Garher. He had the second highest arc ever after Purvis Short. He's the all-time arc.
Oh, yeah.
But Garher was second, not by a whole lot. And he swishes that jumper and sends us into the third overtime, the highlight of which, Glenn McDonald, who had been sitting around minding his own business, the whole night, after Nelson fouls out, Cowens has already fouled out long ago, and he and Kaburski thinks he's going to go in. No, Tommy says, Glenn, get in there. He, in one stretch of a minute and some odd seconds, scores 6 points and turns the ball over and misses a layup. But had the biggest basket of the game, a baseline turnaround on the break that was a tough shot. And he's got the fresh legs. And then they get up by 6. Jim Ard goes after Jim Ard makes 2 free throws with who was it? That Sobers, I think, was razzing him or giving him a choke sign. And Ard makes the 2 free throws. And then Westfall comes within a fingernail of stealing the ball at midcourt and have given the team one more chance. Final score 128-126, 3 overtimes. And by the way, the whole elapsed time of the game was 3 hours and 5 minutes. Right at today.
It ended at
12:08 midnight. It was one of my all-time nights ever. And writing the game to get it on and beating to make the deadline. And then we find out only the next morning that Tommy Heinsohn had collapsed in the locker room after the game. We didn't even know it.
Oh, he looked like he was going to collapse on the court.
Yeah, and
so sweaty.
What I remember is that we were getting on the plane the next morning at the airport at 10 o'clock flight out to Phoenix, and that the Game 6 started at noontime or 11 a.m. Phoenix time, and I was talking to Westfall recently about this, and of course the right phenomenon of that game was the Phoenix crowd, which had only watched the game on television, was dead. They were emotionally gone and had gave nothing to their team in that 6th game. And it was and both teams naturally were dead. They had nothing to offer. But Charlie Scott had fouled out of Game 5 in 25 minutes of desultory playing time. After the game, Red Auerbach, this is why Red was red, among other reasons, many, goes up to him and says, "Go get your rest. You are going to be very important on Sunday." Well, guess who had 25 points and had the best game of anybody on either team on Sunday in Game 6? Charlie Scott.
Charlie Scott. And who was the MVP? JoJo?
JoJo was the well-deserved MVP.
So
JoJo had 33 in the Game 5, including 15 in the overtimes.
Westfall, JoJo, DJ, even to a certain extent, Max, Johnny Most. Some of them not in the Hall of Fame. Why is it taking so long for DJ to get in? He's in now. Westfall just getting in now?
Well, Westfall's will be a controversial choice because of his greatness was 5 great years.
Yeah, but it was great.
5 great years. Oh, he was. And look, I wrote the program story, by the way. So, I mean, I put my hand up immediately because he's one of my favorite, my closest, really legit friend I ever made in the business was Westfall. And I was very thrilled and pleased and honored to write his program story. But 5 great years. And, he was a sub in Boston, and he was traded for Charlie. Very interesting trade. And then he gave them those 5 great years, and then he got hurt. He was traded to Seattle, and he hurt his foot. And then, long story, Sam Schulman wanted to get rid of him because he was angry at his agent, Howard Slusher, because Howard Slusher had held out Gus Williams that whole year, if you remember.
Right, that's true.
He took it out on Westfall, got him traded to the Knicks, and he was not healthy. And anyway, and his career, they wound up ending it in Phoenix. But 5 great years, during which time he was 3 times all first team All-NBA, 2 times second, and was extraordinarily. It was as good a dynamic a player as there was, and certainly a backcourt player as there was in the league in those days. All right, he gets in. He gets into the College Hall of Fame and the Nesmith Hall of Fame within months of each other, which is very interesting. DJ, I fought for DJ, screamed and hollered and stamped my foot, and it finally happened. Max is a wonderful, solid player, but he does not belong in the Hall of Fame.
Even though he's NBA, he's the only NBA Finals MVP.
I know. He was the NBA, and he was the NBA Finals. Yeah, he was the final. Well, hey, is Iguodala going to go in the Hall of Fame? He's an NBA. Max was the 1981 MVP. Yes, I voted for him. People think I didn't, but I did. And but somebody voted for Cowan. Somebody voted for Bird, and everybody thinks it was me, but it wasn't. So I voted for him. But Max, I had. issues with at times, in the end of his career. But boy, when he did what he did well, he's the kind of player, of course, we were talking earlier, doesn't exist anymore because most of his game was 10 feet in.
Yep. Right. 84 Game 7. Another.
Oh, that was jump on my back, boys.
Yep.
And he took James Worthy down into the old torture chamber and gave him a little lesson.
Talk about the choke sign for Magic. That's become iconic from him.
Max was hilarious. I mean, he wasn't it.
Was he as hilarious as a player?
Yes. Oh yeah. And Larry, they loved him as a teammate. But he didn't. I don't want to go.
You don't have to.
I don't want to go there. I'm not going.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
Not going there because I want to.
Johnny Most.
I loved watching him. Oh my God, a fictional character. I once actually roomed with him one night and during the exhibition season.
How did you breathe? Were you smoking with him? Or?
Yeah, no, I don't remember how much he smoked, but we talked into the night, and we talked about everything, politics. I know one thing we talked about. He was a devotee of big band music. He was a huge Benny Goodman fan, and
awesome,
and loved music and big band music, which I love as well. But Johnny was always fun to travel with. You never knew what was going to come out, and he was a piece of work without question.
How's he not in the Hall, Bob?
It's ridiculous. Right?
I mean, he has the most iconic call, arguably in all sports.
It's ridiculous. I mean, he and Chick's in, and he should be, and Johnny should be there. They should have gone in like Bird and Magic. They should have gone in together because they were opposite coast icons of a totally different type. Chick Hearn was the most ruthlessly nonpartisan, honest, announcer, and Johnny was gave Homerism a bad name, even worse name. But he was the most loyal Homer you could ever imagine. Chick was the most brutal. I remember going through and Chick. I'm driving up the coast and one night and out of L.A. and they're playing, and this is when they weren't one of their better teams, and they botched an inbounds play and said, "I told you all year this team can't pass the ball." Blah, 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 blah. And he's like a vice president of the team. He's on the payroll, but he could. Chick Hearn, he could do that.
Oh man, these are great stories. All right, one more, and then I'll toss it to you, Ty, and then we'll let Bob go. He's busy. Bob, were you there in '92? Talk about, I think it was triple overtime. It was definitely double overtime. Probably Bird's last stand. 49. He had a triple double, 49 points. If not, I'll cut this out.
No, you're talking about
against the Blazers.
Against the Blazers. No. Because I do believe the game you're thinking of was a Sunday.
It was.
It was during the Final Four, and I was.
Yes, it was March.
At the Final Four, and you know what? There's a story attached to everything, guys. Stan Albeck sees me. He's there on behalf of whatever team he was with then, and sees me. He said, "Bob, did you see Larry?" He said, "He turned the clock back. You should have seen Larry today." He saw, and I said, "No, Stan, I didn't see it." But I'm sure that's the game you're talking about. Of course, the year before was the year when he banged his head on the floor and came back and beat him. And I can still hear Bob Hill after the game saying, I told our guys he's coming back, and when he does, he's coming back with guns blazing."
And he did.
And he did.
He did. Anybody more intelligent you've ever seen play than Bird?
No, only Havlicek. They're on the same level in that regard. They're savants of the game. Saw things before they happened. John, unlike John, Larry did coach, and Larry said I'm going to coach 3 years, and that's it, and he did, and nobody keeps their promise, but he did.
No.
John knew it was not. John would not have had sufficient patience or understanding as to the frailty of mortal man, why these players couldn't understand A, B, C, and D as readily as he did, and he knew that of himself, and he never got involved in coaching.
Amazing.
And Hondo probably would not have taken lack of effort by today's athlete, I assume.
Oh my God! No, but at any time, no. John knew himself quite well. He lived his life the way he wanted to. From that point on, he was very successful in various investments and businesses, and he got invested early by Mark McCormick when he was making his bones as the great. I won't say manipulator, but the great handler of stars, Nicholas and so forth, and he got John invested in properly, and John never had to work at anything he didn't want to do the rest of his life, and died unfortunately after contracting Parkinson's, which was
terrible.
It was not. Yeah, such an ironically cruel ending, for someone who was so incredibly physical.
Right, like Muhammad Ali. I mean, it's just incredible the way God deals you a curveball sometimes.
Yeah, really. And but my last time I talked to John was in last December, and it was a fun story I did I talked to he and Kuzi about their mutual admiration for Belichick.
Interesting.
Yes. And
where does Belichick stand in Boston coaches?
Well, it's got it's two at the top, and the basketball people are going to go Red, and football people are going to go Belichick, and they're both going to be right. And I'm going to go and say I'm very happy to have a stand, give them both condos on top of the Sports Mount Olympus here, and they can have lunch every day.
I have one question for you, Bob, which is I live out here in the Seattle area, and of course Bill Russell lives out on Mercer Island. Do you ever talk to him?
No, it's hard. He's hard to reach. By the way, Bill Russell has an op-ed piece in the Boston Globe today about mentoring, and it's very eloquent and about his great involvement with the mentoring. I won't call it association, but this is one has been his cause, his primary cause for a couple of decades. And he's got an op-ed piece in the Globe today about bridges and social responsibility for everybody, and it's really, really, really very, very powerful. But no, I would love to have had a relationship. Who wouldn't? I did have one during the '80s when I was still covering and he was broadcasting, and we had lots of nice, very, very good chats. And then of course I had my great memory in 1999 when we finally got around to honoring him properly in Boston, had the big ceremony at the Boston Garden. And Will took a flight overnight to come from California, and it was really a terrific thing. The MC, I hate to tell you, was Bill Cosby, but what are you going to do?
I didn't remember that, Bill Cosby.
Who knew,
Right.
And Cosby, and only, Cosby, Wilt was a good sport. He allowed Cosby to make jokes at his expense about, Russell beating him all the time. That could not have happened the other way around, I can assure you. But anyway, in the run-up to this, I was assigned to do a preview story and stuff for the Globe, and I was able to obtain an interview dinner with Bill and his then girlfriend, future wife, and a PR lady in Providence. And we sat down there at Capitol Grill in Providence, and we sat there and closed that place up. 3 hours worth and he was in high humor with cackling, that famous cackle of his, and telling stories and giving me the best stuff I could get, and it was terrific. I'll remember that night, as long as I live. It was a great honor to have anything to do with him.
Ty, I'm going to do it. I'm going to name 3 names, Bob. I just want you to react to them, and so I'm going to start with maybe Rudy Tomjanovich.
Oh, bank shot.
Yep.
Bank shot, the greatest long-range banker. The 2 great bankers, or 3 of of the last 40 years, were Sam Jones and him and Duncan. But Sam was a mid-range banker, and Duncan was a turnaround off-the-box banker, and Rudy was a bombardier banker. I mean, you're talking threes if necessary. Greatest banker, really, because of that, probably ever. Also, wonderfully nice guy. He coached that ill-fated USA team in '98 in the World Championships when the NBA was on strike and they couldn't send all the right players, and he had a team of college guys and CBA guys and stuff, and they wound up losing in the semis to Russia. A painful game, I'll never forget it. But Rudy was the coach of that team, and then thank God they gave him the honor of being able to coach a real team down the road. But and like everybody that knows him, we're very fond of Rudy.
Who did he get in the fight with?
That was he was Kermit Washington, and that's another story.
Kermit Washington.
And of course, read John Feinstein's book. That's all you need to know. Yep.
Okay. Infamous 2 names: Curtis Rowe, Sidney Wicks.
College. First of all, I was a huge Sidney Wicks fan in college. I think he's at the time that he came out of UCLA. I thought he was one of the 15 best college players of all time. And his rookie year, he averaged 20-some points a game. And he's one of the few players in history. He went down every year. Every year he went down. And first 7 years of his career. I don't know. It was something he didn't want to. There was something of contrary about him. Rowe when we got here, Roe was a cynic, a hardened cynic. Supposedly, he's the guy that cautioned Maxwell, who was lamenting a loss at some point, and allegedly said,
"Yeah,
kid, don't worry about it. They don't put the W's and L's on the paycheck." And
allegedly,
he was highly indifferent here. Wicks did not endear himself to the crowd. He was not a hustler. He was the anti-hustle. Heinsohn just wanted him to go out and rebound and play defense. Got it, and he didn't want to play in that role. And they were very and of course he only came here after the famous swap with the Buffalo Braves, who became the San Diego Clippers, and I said he came later on as part of reparations, like Germany. But anyway, not finally remembered here. That's for sure.
Bob, I was telling Nick. I said I wish I could go back in a time machine and send Kyrie Irving to play for John Y. Brown.
That was my third. Wait a minute, Ty, you just screwed me.
I'm sorry.
Roe and Wicks are one person. They're both the devil. So third is Kyrie Irving.
All right, my theory on Kyrie is that he is now entering his third team. It will be at least 4 or 5, and each team, as it's already happened, after he departs, will say, "Wow, we couldn't figure that guy out." That's A. B, he's not as smart as he thinks he is.
Yeah,
and he speaks very sounds eloquent, and at the end of it, you say, "What did he just say?" What?
Exactly.
And B, and then C is I'll preface C by saying he has yet to this moment ever categorically stated why he left Cleveland. We assume we know, but he never has said it. And say it. Say, "I wanted my own show." Say it. He won't say it. Okay. He's searching. Now he's searching. He didn't get what he wanted here. He's searching for something. I don't think he even knows what it is. That's my armchair psychology on that. I have 2 words of advice for the Nets, the management, the coaching staff, the teammates, and the fans. 2 words. Caveat emptor. Buyer beware.
I agree. I never been around a player that exuded more tension. I'd never been in a more tense locker room. I haven't obviously been in nearly as many as you, but that locker room, you'd walk in there and he was in a bad mood, and it would just be the air would be thick.
Let me say, he is enormously gifted, and he is as good a finisher at the rim as any sub 6'5" guy has ever been.
There's big words.
And that includes Isaiah. It includes anyone you want to name. Either or both Isaiahs.
Isaiah, right.
It was because the little guy's incredible too. It was that year in Boston. But his finishing. He's an awesome talent. But there's more than talent that goes into it, as we all know.
Ty, all you. Yeah, I'm out. Bob, you've been very gracious with your time. This has been amazing. We could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
Ty, if you weren't going to cut this, I would have just stayed on the phone until 3.
And let them talk. We can have part 2 sometime.
That would be nice.
I would just say names and let them react. That's what I want to do, because I don't think there's anybody that you don't have a reaction to. It's all great stuff.
Well, I like to say, and I know how incredibly awfully pretentious this sounds, but facts. I've seen every great player the last 60 years, and until the latest crop of high school seniors, I'll fine. But you know what I'm saying. I mean, I go back to literally saying. I saw Cousy, and yes, I saw Mikan on TV. I can remember watching the Minneapolis Lakers against the Syracuse Nats on TV, and on a game of the week and all that. I've been fortunate. It's incredible. I've been very, very, very fortunate. I was born the same year of the NBA. I used to kid about that. I have literally grown up with the NBA.
Well, we're really fortunate to have you, man. I mean, every time I run into you, I try to pull you to the side just for one story, and today you gave us how many, Ty? About 30?
Yeah. we didn't help. We were all over the map.
Yeah, but you have to be when you're talking to the encyclopedia. I mean, come on. Well, you don't need the glossary.
It's funny because when I got into this, I was a college guy, and my NBA interest was cursory. I was I was born and bred
Philly, right?
on college. But my 2 foundation sports growing up in Trenton, New Jersey, were Major League Baseball and college basketball. And then at BC, I went to Celtic games with my friends because, oh my God, it was the Celtics. You had to go, and you went. But I didn't root for them. I was staunchly against them, rooting for Philadelphia. And I really wasn't, I needed to learn. That's why I was so lucky when I started covering that Tommy Heinsohn was a rookie coach, and he was cultivating the most representative of the most important media outlet in New England, which, of course, was the Boston Globe. And I was in need of learning the ins and outs of the NBA, the nuances to that. And between what I learned from him and what I learned from those veterans, such as how, imagine this, breaking in, 23 years old, loving the game, eager, to learn, and you got his professors, Havlicek, Sanders, Nelson. That's not bad.
Oh, man. God.
And then Collins comes the next year, and suddenly I'm older than this guy. And, that's all right away. But, boy, it was incredibly fertile and bountiful time for me.
Well, Bob, thank you so much, man. I will talk to you soon. And this was a treat.
Well, thank you.
And we'll do a part 2 for sure.
That sounds great, guys. Okay.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bob. I'll talk to you.
Nick, that's unbelievable.
How cool was that?
It just doesn't get any better. If you're a sports fan, if you're a fan of basketball, how you can't.
And the man gets trolled constantly.
I don't get it. And kids, and I'm going to say the word kids, as in 30 years of age and down. Why don't you do some homework?
Yep.
And read up on this guy?
Yep.
No one brings the context like Bob Ryan.
No. And honestly, we're naming names off the cuff. You could name the 12th man on any roster through any of those decades, and he'd probably have a story for it.
Oh, it's never ending. That was the whole thing, Nick, is we could have sat here and gone on and on and on. We should have had a telethon, right? We could have raised money. We could have been on for so long talking to him about the NBA, the ABA. And if you don't know who Bob Ryan is, well, first of all, you're in a cave.
Yep.
But second of all, he's not he's not just a PTI guy.
No.
Right? Have some respect. Go back. Learn about him. Well, that goes back. Yeah, correct. And that goes back to young Celtic fans, and I've preached this since I've been part of CLNS for our younger audience. Learn about the history. It's amazing.
Well, and I think, Ty, to me, that was the biggest fear in this entire Kyrie Irving experiment, was that he was going to – the culture had just resurrected with KG, and Kyrie was going to smash that down and make Boston an undesirable destination again. And thankfully, the Celtics have best GM in the NBA, and they rebounded with Kemba pretty damn quick. So it was like he didn't miss a beat in regards to at least PR-wise. But it did bring out I've been busting you for I don't even know how many years for getting into it with social media followers, whether it be Facebook or Twitter. But this Kyrie Irving, after February, I just couldn't take it, because it did bring to my attention how many fans are they could destroy me on a spreadsheet as far as data goes with players, but they just really don't have a clue. They're more interested in players than teams, and to me, that's not good. And if we had time, I would have run it by Bob as well. I mean, it's like I was on a show yesterday, Ty, and I said, I've never done heroin, but I would imagine that's how it is, because free agency this year couldn't have been more fun for the first couple hours. And since then, it was a little bit fun the other day too, when Kawhi punked LeBron. Although I would have rather Kawhi stay and defend his title. But, it's never more evident that, with the new influx of fans that came with Kyrie, that, the team, the franchise, the culture, and the history, they just don't matter anymore. And all it does is the flash and the sensationalism and the box score, which half of these fans don't know how to read a box score.
They certainly didn't matter to Kyrie, right? The history. No. And it makes me very angry that he shot that bullshit commercial.
Well, that's
talking about his banner up there. Don't use Celtic tradition as a friggin' punchline.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll tell you this. I think it annoyed me just as much that at 5:59 with 59 seconds on the trade deadline, he had a fully produced video to Brooklyn, which, not only is it fraudulent, but it just proves they were tampering, which is, again, a complete disregard for the game if you're going to tamper to that extent. I mean, tampering always goes on, and I realize that. But when people don't remember, Danny Ainge got fined for tampering for speaking to Kevin Durant's mother in 2006. I mean, and it was at a college game. Who knows what he even said, but you have audio and videotape and on social media proof that these guys were tampering. You have evidence from the Lakers about Anthony Davis and the Pelicans about how Rich Paul and all the agents and all, and yet he's still in Los Angeles. So I could go on and sound like an old man, but it's like a heroin fix, dude. I think, you're going to see high ratings, but you look at a team like Charlotte, and if I'm Michael Jordan, I mean, I know he's notoriously cheap, but I ain't paying anybody the max in that city, the super max. I'm not paying that. They'll never recoup that money. And that player is in purgatory for the rest of their lives because the NBA, since David Stern has left, no longer supports small market teams. They support players. Bob said something interesting, Ty, 6 games and 6 nights in 3 different cities. And the commissioner today has the nerve to say that NBA players just aren't happy. Back then they were playing quadruple headers, back to back to back to back to back to back to backs. They weren't making nearly the money. There was no free agency. There was no player, power or latitude there is today. And today NBA players just aren't happy. I don't get it. I never will. I know that as long as we're blessed to have guys like Bob and Jackie and even to a certain miserable extent, Shaughnessy, you're going to a miserable extent, who, by the way, loves it. I was just talking to somebody in the media, or a fan the other day, and they said they ran into him outside Fenway. They walked right up to Shaughnessy and said, "Oh, man, Dan, it's really nice to meet you. I got to tell you just how much I hate you." And Shaughnessy said, "Thank you." So he embraces it. But right. I mean, you look at Dan, as smug as he is, he's got great knowledge of the game and the past. And we're lucky to have these people because that's all that's left as the players, and the coaches continue to go and the media continues to move forward with the national coverage of sensationalistic nonsense. And I could keep going and going.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do it or else.
Well, we're going to do it again. We're going to do part 2 with Bob Ryan.
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2. We're going to do it with Bob soon, and maybe we'll be a little more focused because we went all over the place. But it was fun.
You can't be focused with Bob Ryan. If you have 20 minutes with Bob Ryan, dude? I know I see him a lot, right? It always is the same conversation. I watch him until he's alone, and I make eye contact, give him the head nod, and I come right over. We start talking about Kareem, or about Bird, or Caleb Cowens is his favorite. I wanted to bring up 83. People forget Dave Cowens was on that Bucks roster that swept the Celtics.
Well, I got to talk about 2 things with him. One, Dave Cowens, who is one of my all-time favorite Celtics.
And Havlicek.
And Havlicek as well. And 2, we got to talk about Game 5 of the 76 finals, the Suns and Celtics, which to me, arguably the greatest sporting event of all time. Yes, I said it. It had everything, right? It had drama. It had the heavy underdog playing it had all the elements of a great movie, and Bob got to witness that, and we got to talk about that. And I've always wanted to talk to Bob Ryan about that Suns Celtics game. Oh, those many years ago. What, 53 years ago? No, that's 43 incredible. Years ago. 43 years. 53. Let's not make me any older.
I'm going to go older. But Ty, you think about that, it still resonated. I mean, 76 was obviously Glenn McDonald. 87, they compared Darren Day's, I think it was against the Bucks, performance off the bench as Glenn McDonald. 2008, PJ Brown.
PJ
Who did they compare
Brown.
him to in games? In what game was it? 6, I think.
Yeah.
Or no, against the Cavs. Game
Against
7.
the Cavs. It was game 7.
That was one of my all-time favorites, Shai, because you had the Glenn McDonald moment with PJ, and then there was nothing better. I shed a tear when Paul Pierce went to the line, and that ball hit the back of the rim, went all the way up in the air, came back down and went in, and that's what kind of sealed the game. And after the game, Pierce said that was Red that tapped the ball in.
Just like Don Nelson in '69 in L.A.,
yep.
right? The ball hits the back of the rim, goes straight up, and comes right back down as the Celtics upset the Lakers in '69 when L.A. thought they were going to – that was the last title. That was the great Russell teams.
Yep.
So I have one other one for you. Gerald Henderson in '84 stealing the ball, right?
Stole the ball. Yep. I mean, that's the thing with most. You got – Bird stole the ball. Henderson stole the ball. Havlicek stole the ball. I mean, you have 3 of the most iconic, at least in basketball. Havlicek stole the ball is usually in a highlight clip for any sports, multi-sport show. And yet he's not in the Hall of Fame. I just don't get that.
Makes no sense.
Nobody has an answer. I ask everybody that question. Well, how is Johnny Most not in the Hall of Fame?
How is that possible? Some of the most iconic calls in basketball history. Well, Nick, you and I can go on forever.
We sure could.
Wrap this up. Let's wrap this Garden Report up.
Yeah, man. I'm sure everybody's going to be pissed at us because we talked about prior to 2015. So if you want to tell me off, I'm CLNS_Nick, and he's Coog
88. You know what? They'd be telling us off if we were talking about yesterday's news, right? Because these guys have the attention spans of a 3-year-old.
It is. And we could go on and on, so let's just stop.
Stop now. It's a real pleasure, Nick.